The chandeliers of the city's grand museum sparkled like constellations, each crystal refracting light across gowns and tuxedos as the gala unfolded in dazzling splendor. Waiters drifted with silver trays, champagne, flutes clinking, laughter spilling like music over marble floors. But tonight, there was only one star, brighter than any glittering guest or glass tower of champagne: the necklace. It sat at the center of the room in a velvet-draped glass case, 100 years of legend set in diamonds and sapphires, the so-called siren's tear. People leaned close, murmuring reverently, as if the jewel itself whispered secrets from another era. A curator, voice trembling with pride, announced its return to the city after decades hidden away in private vaults. Phones flashed, journalists scribbled, and beneath the glamour, a subtle tension stirred, for everyone, new treasures this rare never lingered without attracting shadows. When the final toast rang out and guests spilled into the night, the necklace was sealed into the museum's most impenetrable safe, locked with triple measures: biometric scan, coded keypad, reinforced steel door. Security guards watched the procedure, their presence stiff and unwavering. The director herself placed her hand on the scanner, her authority etched in stone. Cameras rolled, red lights blinking like vigilant eyes. Nothing, no one, could touch what now rested in silence. But morning broke with a scream. The safe was empty.
Welcome to Echoing Tales, where horror lingers and mysteries whisper. Subscribe for chilling stories, true crime, and the eerie unknown. Now turn down the lights and let's step into the story.
No scratches, no alarms, no glitches in the system. The log showed the safe was never opened, and yet the necklace was gone, vanished without sound or trace, as though it had dissolved into the air like mist. Investigators stormed the museum, their shoes echoing sharply against cold stone floors. Impossible, one muttered, staring at the yawning mouth of the safe. This doesn't happen. Not here. The museum staff. Shock gave way to fear. Reputations, funding, careers, all suddenly dangling over an abyss. The director, pale and trembling, insisted nothing was overlooked. The necklace was locked away. I was there. It was there. Her voice cracked, a mixture of pride and dread, as though some invisible hand had stolen not just the jewel, but her very authority. Detective Mara Jensen was summoned, a lady known for chasing impossibilities. She entered the silent vault like a surgeon stepping into an operating room. Her eyes swept across the room, catching details others overlooked. The faint scuff on the floor near the keypad, the slight delay in the security camera feed, the way a guard's hand lingered nervously near his badge as if it weighed more than usual. She said nothing at first, only tracing the invisible lines of the crime, like a cartographer mapping an unfamiliar land. Whispers spread beyond the museum walls, rumors of it being an inside job. And there, amid the wreckage of certainty, the true weight of the crime began to settle. This was no simple theft. It was a message, a challenge. Somewhere in the city, a thief was smiling, and the chase had only just begun. Somewhere in the city, a thief was smiling, and the chase had only just begun. The crowd had been cleared out, the glitter of champagne glasses and whispered speculation replaced by the hollow quiet of the museum's grand hall. Detective Mara Jensen stood before the safe, its steel face pristine, polished, untarnished, as if mocking her with its very perfection. The gala banners still hung from the vaulted ceiling, swaying faintly with the draft of air conditioning, and the golden necklace, the evening star, had vanished as if it had never existed. Her gloved hand hovered over the keypad. No scratches, no forced override. The system's log, glowing faintly on the mounted screen, insisted that the safe had not been accessed since the director locked it hours ago, in full view of donors and press. Cameras played back their silent reels. Guards pacing, guests mingling, the safe untouched. And yet the necklace was gone. Mara exhaled slowly, her reflection looking back at her in the safe's brushed steel. "Impossible crimes don't exist," she muttered, though the words rang hollow. The museum's director, a thin man with sharp spectacles and a trembling jaw, hovered nearby, wringing his hands. "Detective, the insurance company will ruin us if this gets out. We secured every entry. Every lock is sealed. It's witchcraft, not witchcraft," Mara said sharply, crouching low to study the seams. Someone knew this safe, knew its habits, and they knew how to make it tell a lie. She straightened, her mind already running ahead. If the log was cleaned, someone had overridden it in a way that left no trace. But that meant inside access. Not just any thief could bend reality around steel and circuitry. A uniformed officer approached, hesitant. Detective guests are whispering about the necklace's curse. Stories about anyone who displays it meeting bad luck. Mara arched her brow. Superstition doesn't steal jewels. People do. Still, her chest tightened. She'd read the reports herself. Previous owners bankrupted. One found drowned in his own pool, another vanishing without a trace. Yet curses didn't rewrite electronic entries or fool security feeds. That was human work. Calculated. Precise. She paced the room, her heels clicking against marble, scanning the corners. The gala hall, so full of life only an hour ago, now resembled a crime scene frozen in time. Tables abandoned mid-toast, silk gloves left behind, the champagne flute tipped over, its fizz long gone. Everything whispered interruption, something carefully orchestrated. The director took her into a room in the back of the room of CCTV. "Director," she asked suddenly, "who had access to this safe's internal system?" Not the keypad, not the keys, the back end. He stammered, sweat gathering under his glasses. "Only myself and Mr. Hanley, our head of security. But he was right here all night. You saw him." Mara turned toward the monitors. Hanley, tall and broad, in a pressed black suit, had indeed been visible. Always near the main floor, shaking hands with patrons, reassuring them with his presence. Too visible, perhaps. A man placing himself in every shot could be a man writing his own alibi. Her pulse sharpened. "Impossible crimes don't exist," she whispered again. "They're just puzzles dressed as miracles." The director blinked. "Detective, what are you saying?" Mara stood tall, her voice steady, her eyes never leaving the frozen image of Hanley's false reflection. "I'm saying," she breathed, "that someone inside your perfect fortress is a liar, and I intend to catch them out." The reflection stopped her cold. Mara leaned closer, angling her body against the case so the overhead lights wouldn't distort the glass. There it was, unmistakable, a silhouette, blurred yet undeniable, a figure in a dark mask, their head tilted as though watching, waiting. She froze the frame, enlarging it on the monitor until the pixels began to fracture. The shape remained. Someone had been there. She straightened slowly, her mind tightening around the paradox like a vice. If the log said no one entered, if the camera showed no breach, then this masked figure was either a ghost, or the system itself had been bent to hide them. "Detective, I'm telling you," the head of security muttered, hovering close with the nervous energy of someone whose career dangled by a thread. "We logged every entrance, every passcode. The system was untouched. If someone was in that hall, they weren't there by any means I can explain." Mara didn't look at him, and yet, she whispered, tapping the screen where the reflection glowed faintly. They were watching. The thought gnawed at her. Whoever this was hadn't rushed. They hadn't stumbled or scrambled. They had stood there calmly, close enough to watch her victim, the necklace, disappear. That meant confidence, planning, a thief who believed themselves untouchable. She scanned the glass again, this time more carefully. Reflections told stories no direct angle could reveal. In the faint glimmer beside the figure's arm, Mara caught something else. A smudge of pale light. A strip of cloth? A glove perhaps? No. She leaned closer. It was embroidery. A pattern so specific it could only belong to someone who didn't care if they were seen. A mark, subtle but deliberate. A calling card. Mara's chest tightened. She'd seen this once before. Years ago in a file she was told to close without question. The same masked shadow, the same hint of embroidery. The press had whispered about an invisible thief, but the case had gone nowhere, sealed away under the weight of politics and sponsors. Now they were back. She turned to the security chief, her voice sharper than glass. Every staff member who worked tonight, pull their uniforms, their gloves, everything. I want fabrics compared, stitches examined. If someone thinks they can stand in plain sight and walk away with that necklace, then they're taunting us. Her eyes drifted back to the reflection, the stillness of the masked figure captured in that accidental sliver of glass. Whoever they were, they hadn't just stolen a necklace. And Mara knew with a chilling certainty, they weren't done yet. Detective Mara Jensen sat in the dimly lit staff room. The long table covered in folders, transcripts, and half-drunk cups of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. The air was heavy with tension, and the weight of suspicion hung like a storm cloud over every name she circled in her notes. One by one, she had called the museum employees, peeling back layers of smiles and rehearsed politeness until the cracks began to show. Resentment over promotions, whispers of money troubles, old wounds reopened by jealousy. The prestigious museum, with its pristine galleries and polished marble floors, suddenly felt more like a battleground of hidden vendettas. The staff swore loyalty to the institution, but Mara knew better. She'd seen the way one archivist clenched his jaw when asked about a fellow colleague's rise in rank, or how another's hands trembled when she pressed about debts he had tried to bury. Resentment leaves stains deeper than fingerprints, and she was beginning to see a pattern. The necklace wasn't just a jewel. It was leverage, a prize worth betraying anyone for. But the investigation twisted again when she requested a follow-up interview with Dr. Lionel Keats, one of the museum's senior curators and a man considered beyond reproach. He had been calm, measured, even helpful during his first questioning, offering details about the gala's timeline and his role in preparing the necklace for display. Yet when the time came for his second meeting, he didn't show. Calls went unanswered. His office remained locked. And when security forced the door open, what they found inside made Mara's pulse quicken. The room was in disarray. Papers scattered across the desk, drawers left ajar, and a single lamp overturned, its bulb shattered on the floor. On the far end of the desk, however, was something deliberate. A stack of notes scrawled in Keats' handwriting, but not like any ordinary correspondence. Lines of cryptic numbers, odd symbols, half-finished sentences threaded with words like mirror, echo, and threshold. It was as if he had been working on a puzzle no one else knew existed. Mara leaned closer, tracing one of the symbols with her finger. It wasn't random. She recognized fragments of cipher work, substitutions, and patterns she had seen before in cases of code breaking. This wasn't the frantic scrawl of a desperate man. It was instructions, maybe even a confession hidden behind a puzzle. But there was something else. Tucked beneath the notes was a ticket stub, a small detail easily missed. It wasn't for the gala, but for a lecture held 2 weeks earlier at a private collector society across the city. An exclusive group known for dealing in acquisitions that blurred the line between legal and illicit. Mara's instincts tightened around the possibility. Keats hadn't just vanished in fear. He might have been part of something larger all along, his codes pointing to a plan that stretched beyond the museum walls. She stood in the silent office, the weight of the notes in her hands, realizing the impossible theft might not have been the endgame, but merely the opening move. Somewhere, Keats was either running from danger or orchestrating it, and Mara knew one truth was becoming clear. This crime wasn't just about a stolen necklace. It was about secrets woven into the very fabric of the museum, and someone was willing to burn everything down to make sure they stayed hidden. The derelict building smelled of mildew and rot, the kind of damp that clung to the lungs and reminded you that no one had belonged there for years. Detective Mara Jensen stepped into the hollow chamber where the body of the missing curator lay sprawled, his face pale with the kind of stillness that stripped away all traces of the man he'd been when alive. His fingers, rigid in death, clutched a small velvet box, the red darkened with age, its hinges corroded with a faint green tarnish. But it was not the weight of the corpse that made the air heavier. It was what Mara found when she pried open the box. Inside lay the necklace, or at least what appeared to be the necklace. The diamond centerpiece sparkled faintly under the beam of her flashlight. The delicate chains curled like frozen rivers of silver. It was flawless, perfect in every cut and angle. Too convincing for anything but a mastercrafted replica. Mara's throat tightened. Someone had gone through immense trouble. Not to keep the jewel hidden, but to make sure the museum, the press, and the donors could be fooled if this decoy were returned quietly. Kneeling closer, Mara studied the curator's face. He had been missing for 2 days, his absence igniting whispers of betrayal, of an inside job, of someone too loyal to the gallery's history to truly defect. And yet here he was, discarded, dead, and clutching a lie. On the wall behind him, chalky symbols were scrawled hastily, a lattice of numbers and letters that looked like codes, but each was fractured, incomplete. She snapped photographs of them, her gut twisted. The same kind of markings had been on the notes he left behind before his disappearance. This was not the work of a desperate thief. It was the signature of someone orchestrating chaos with precision. Detective, a voice called from the hallway. Ruiz, her partner, stepped in, his expression grim. Forensics just confirmed. The real necklace? Already gone. Sold in a silent auction on the black market. Mara's pulse slowed, every thought aligning into one harrowing realization. The gala theft had never been about the necklace's disappearance in isolation. The safe, untouched. The cameras, empty. The digital log, unbroken. All of it pointed to one conclusion. The curator hadn't stolen the jewel. He'd been a mule, a placeholder in a game far larger than the museum walls. The replica was insurance. The real prize had been funneled out through channels so quick and so covert that by the time the staff noticed it missing, the diamond had already traded hands in the shadows. She rose, glancing again at the corpse. His lips were parted slightly, as if he had died mid-sentence, some truth smothered before escaped. Mara's jaw tightened. Whoever orchestrated this had written the curator out of his own story, using him as one more misdirection. And now, with the necklace gone and the replica left behind, the museum's reputation was dangling by a thread, waiting to be cut by the first paper that caught wind of the forgery. Any leads on who bought it? Mara asked. Ruiz shook his head. Encrypted bids. Anonymous buyers. It's already vanished into private hands. Could be halfway across the globe by now. But Mara wasn't convinced. She turned back to the scrawled symbols on the wall, tracing them with her eyes, remembering the reflection she had seen in the overlooked display glass. The masked figure who wasn't supposed to exist. Whoever that was, they had left no trace on cameras, no digital footprint, nothing but a shadow and a silence that mocked the investigation. Her phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Every masterpiece deserves a collector. Mara stared at the words, her pulse quickening. The case was no longer about theft, not even about the necklace. It was about power, about someone who wanted to prove the impossible could be done, that even the most secure treasures could be stolen not just from safes, but from the very fabric of trust. She pocketed the phone and looked once more at the curator's body. He had been silenced, but not before leaving behind fragments, codes, reflections, replicas. Pieces of a puzzle meant to show Mara that this was far from over. The necklace was gone? Yes, but the game had only just begun. "Let's pack up," she said softly to Ruiz. "This wasn't just a robbery. It's a message, and whoever sent it wants us chasing shadows." As they stepped back into the damp night, Mara knew one thing with sharp certainty. The silent safe had not just been broken. It had been mocked, its silence replaced with echoes that would follow her until she found the collector. And when she did, the necklace would not be the only secret waiting to be unearthed. The revelation landed like a thunderclap in Mara's mind, a truth so sharp it cut through every assumption she had carried since stepping into the museum's glittering gala. The safe had not been forced. No clever cracks or brute force assaults had unlocked it. The very heart of the security was built on a lie, a hidden override buried in the design, known only to the museum's founding board, which meant that whoever had taken the necklace was no outsider, no phantom slipping past cameras, but someone standing proudly within the gilded walls of respectability, trusted by all, yet rotten to the core. She stood in the security archives, the flickering glow of the monitor illuminating her face as the schematics sprawled out in front of her. The override was simple in principle, devastating in effect. A concealed input triggered not by force but by sequence, a silent key built to erase its own footprints. Whoever had wielded it had known not just about its existence, but also how to bury their tracks beneath layers of red herrings. Mara's chest tightened as she read deeper into the archives. The signatures of the founding board, the museum's oldest patrons, families whose names hung etched in marble across its halls, appeared again and again. The override had been their safeguard, a failsafe to ensure their treasures could always be retrieved, even in disputes with governments and creditors. A secret never meant for curators, staff, or security, only for those in the highest seats. Her thoughts twisted back to the dead curator, the scribbled notes, the desperation in the codes he left behind. He had discovered something, not just the theft, but the betrayal itself. The replica he had been found with was not a mockery. It was a warning, a desperate act to buy time, or perhaps to signal that he had stumbled too close to a truth someone powerful needed buried. His death was not collateral. It was cleansing. Mara's fists clenched. The silent auction, the flawless replica, the reflection of a masked figure. Each thread converged now into something larger, something darker. The curator had been framed as a scapegoat, a distraction meant to draw her into a labyrinth of petty grudges among staff, while the real orchestrators, the board, sat above suspicion, their hands hidden behind the sanctity of legacy. The betrayal didn't just sting, it burned. The museum had always been pitched as a temple of culture, a vault of trust. But now Mara saw it for what it was, a palace of shadows, built on hidden doors and corrupted loyalties. And worse, the board wasn't fractured. The override required knowledge passed down, protected by oath, which meant multiple people, perhaps all of them, had either conspired in silence or turned away as one among them weaponized the museum's greatest secret. Her mind flickered to the gala night. The applause as the necklace was unveiled, the champagne toasts, the glittering dresses and immaculate suits. The very people who had clapped the loudest may have already known the necklace's fate. They had smiled at its brilliance while preparing to pocket its worth in shadowed accounts, laughing at the idea of untouchable security while holding the key all along. Mara pressed her palms flat against the cold table, her breath steady. She could feel the walls closing in, the enormity of what lay before her. This wasn't just a theft. It was a betrayal of trust so vast it risked collapsing the museum itself, dragging every staff member, every guard, every patron into scandal. And now she had a choice. To confront the board meant war with power itself. Men and women shielded by wealth, influence, and the illusion of benevolence. To stay silent meant allowing the curator's death to be written off as the desperate act of a thief, erasing the truth forever, letting the necklace vanish into the black market abyss while those responsible celebrated over champagne. History. That was the shield the board had always wielded, the excuse for every secret override, every whispered betrayal. But history was not meant to be protected by silence. It was meant to be revealed, even if the revelation tore down the very walls built to contain it. And in that moment, Mara knew the case was no longer about Necklace. It was about exposing an institution built on corruption disguised as legacy. And she would not be silent. Beneath chandeliers that shimmered with manufactured brilliance, the second gala unfolded like a city's desperate attempt to mend its fractured pride, the guests whispering over champagne glasses as if their words could sweep scandal beneath marble floors. And Detective Mara Jensen stood at the edge of it all, gaze fixed not on the glittering crowd, but on the heart of the deception that had brought her here. The necklace, polished and pristine, sat once more beneath the spotlight in its glass case, as though pretending it had never been spirited into shadows, as though the betrayal that had stained the museum's legacy could be wiped clean with careful presentation and feigned poise. But Mara knew better, and tonight she intended to shatter the illusion for everyone to see. The board members sat at a long table beneath the dais, faces frozen in diplomatic smiles, though Mara saw the tremors of unease in their composure. The knowledge that one among them was not a guardian of heritage, but its thief, its Judas. She let the silence stretch, her footsteps clicking across polished stone until she reached the stage, her voice carrying not like an intruder's interruption, but like the gavel of judgment itself. Steady, cutting, undeniable. She spoke not of vague theories, but of hard truths. The hidden override, the lock that had never been forced, the silent auction where blood money had traded history for profit. The room hushed, whispers fading into brittle silence as her words cracked through the layers of pretense like glass under strain. All eyes shifted when she named them. The mastermind, the board's most trusted figure, a patron whose influence had shielded their ambition for decades. The accused rose, their face tightening into something between fury and fear, words stumbling out in denial. Yet Mara was ready. She gestured to the security feed, replayed the faint reflection in the overlooked glass case, the proof that no phantom had passed through, only a shadow sanctioned by privilege, by access written into the very foundations of the museum itself. The gasps came like a storm, the room dividing between disbelief and betrayal, champagne glasses trembling and hands suddenly cold. When guards approached, the mastermind no longer pleaded innocence. Instead, they spat venom at the crowd, condemning their hypocrisy, reminding them that every artifact in these halls was born from theft, from conquest, from a past none dare confront. Their voice was sharp, a blade meant to wound even as chains closed in. And though Mara felt the sting of the truth in those words, she stood unwavering, because corruption hidden beneath noble banners was still corruption, and betrayal done under the guise of preservation was still betrayal. The necklace was returned to its case, photographed, cataloged, restored to its official place, but its luster could not outshine the scandal that now burned brighter than any gem. Donors withdrew, public trust crumbled, whispers of cover-ups spread through the city like wildfire, and the museum, once revered as a temple of culture, was left hollow, a monument not of honor, but of lies. Mara watched the collapse unfold not with triumph, but with a heavy certainty. The case had been solved, the thief unmasked, but victory here was ruin, not redemption. As the gala emptied into the night, Mara lingered alone in the echoing halls, her reflection caught in glass like the phantom that had started it all. She thought of the curator who had died chasing truths too dangerous to hold, of the board who had fed their institution on secrets, of the public who would never again see these halls without suspicion. The silent safe had been sold as unbreakable, a promise of absolute trust, but had failed not because of brute force or cunning lockpicks, but because the real danger had always lived inside the very people who built it. Thank you for watching Echoing Tales. Subscribe, ring the bell, like and share. Stay tuned, because the next mystery is already calling.